The man in the wheelchair didn't look up. The morphine drip clicked softly, then boots in the hallway. A figure stepped in, sunglasses low, guitar case in hand. It was 1976, Memphis Veterans Hospital. According to nurses, the man in the bed whispered, "I thought you were gone." Before we get to the moment that left the whole ward silent, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the rarest stories from the King's real life. A single fluorescent tube flickered above the Memphis VA Hospital's East Wing. It was mid-July 1976, the kind of humid southern day where the air felt thick enough to drink. Nurse Lillian Brooks wheeled her medication cart past room 214, the squeak of its left wheel echoing down the freshly waxed floor. The sharp scent of antiseptic mixed with the faint grease and onion aroma, drifting up from the cafeteria to floors below. Then she heard it, but not the soft rubber-soled shuffle of orderlies, but the slow, deliberate thud of leather heels. Against tile, two orderlies at the far end paused, glancing toward the sound. They'd heard whispers since morning someone important might be visiting. But whispers in a hospital spread faster than truth. Outside, in the staff-only parking area, a black 1975 Cadillac Fleetwood idled, chrome bumpers glinting in the Tennessee sun. Behind the tinted glass, Elvis Presley sat in the passenger seat. Head tilted down, he wore a plain black sport jacket over a dark shirt. No rhinestones, no scarf, no stage makeup. Just Elvis trying to disappear. Charlie Hodge, his longtime friend and stage aide, leaned from the driver's seat. "You sure about this, E?" Elvis adjusted the brim of his felt fedora. "They'll never see me coming." He smiled faintly, though his eyes stayed serious back inside. Vietnam veteran Robert Bobby Hayes sat propped against the pillows of his narrow hospital bed. His gaze was fixed on the window, where rain clouds were gathering far over the Mississippi River. His body had grown thin from illness, the veins in his hands visible beneath papery skin. He didn't hear the boots approaching at the nurses' station. Lillian caught sight of the man now walking past broad-shouldered, dark hair tucked under a hat, guitar case swinging at his side. Her breath caught in her throat. The sound drew Bobby's attention just as the figure stopped outside. His door, without knocking, the door handle turned, slowly, from Bobby's perspective. The door wasn't opening from the hallway side. It was being pushed from the side that led into the private adjoining room. A room he thought was empty. Cliffhanger. The door to Bobby's room begins to open, but not from the side you'd expect. The adjoining door eased open on its hinges. Afternoon light from the far windows spilled in, cutting a warm diagonal across the floor. Bobby's brow furrowed. Visitors didn't come through that way. That door was for staff and usually locked. Then he saw the hat. Black felt, the shadow of its brim hiding most of the man's face. Sunglasses caught the fluorescent glare, masking his eyes entirely. In his right hand, a weathered brown guitar case. Nurse Lillian froze mid-step in the hall. Her clipboard nearly slipped from her grasp. She looked at the man, then at Bobby, then back again as if waiting for someone else to confirm what she was seeing. Bobby's lips parted, voice dry and slow. You're not supposed to be here." The man closed the distance in 3 easy strides. He set the guitar case against the wall, removed his hat, and let it hang from his fingers. It was Elvis Presley, not the rhinestone-covered, spotlight-soaked Elvis of the Las Vegas stage. This Elvis looked tired. Lines under his eyes, hair tucked back, just a hint of sideburn. No showmanship, just presence. A corner of his mouth lifted. "Neither are you, pal," he said softly. "Let's fix that." Elvis pulled the chair from beside the bed, turning it so he could sit close. His knees nearly touched the metal frame. He reached for Bobby's hand, gripping it with both of his own. The gold ring on his right finger glinted under the overhead light. Charlie Hodge appeared, briefly in the doorway, scanning for security before disappearing again. Elvis leaned toward the nurse, still hovering near the threshold. "Mind if I borrow him for a song?" She didn't speak, just nodded once, and stepped back into the hallway. Bobby's eyes darted to the guitar case. I can't sing much anymore." Elvis smiled wider, almost mischievous. "Then we'll just keep it short." But he didn't open the guitar case. Instead, he sat back, eyes never leaving Bobby's. "I'll tell you what," Elvis said. "You start, I'll follow." Bobby blinked, unsure he'd heard right. "Go on," Elvis urged, his voice low, almost coaxing. "Let's see if you remember this one." Bobby hesitated, then took a breath. His voice was raspy but steady enough for the first line. "Are you lonesome tonight?" His tone cracked slightly, but he pushed through. By the second line, Elvis had closed his eyes, his head tilted just enough to catch the melody. On the third, he joined in soft at first, matching Bobby's pitch perfectly. Nurse Lillian, now back at the doorway, felt her chest tighten. She had seen patients light up when family visited, but never like this. Two voices, one worn and weathered, the other rich and deep blended in the stillness of the room. Bobby's eyes brimmed, but he kept singing. Elvis leaned in closer, their heads almost touching. Cliffhanger. As the last note of the verse faded, Elvis's eyes opened slowly. He didn't reach for the guitar. He just held Bobby's gaze and began to harmonize on the next line. The sound in that small hospital room was nothing like a stage performance. No microphones, no amplifiers, just two voices meeting in the middle of a summer afternoon. Elvis's baritone wrapped around Bobby's fragile tenor, smoothing over every crack in his voice. The fluorescent hum overhead faded beneath their harmonies. At the doorway, a young orderly leaned in, holding a Polaroid camera. He pressed the shutter click were capturing Elvis mid-verse, head bent toward the man in the bed. The camera ejected a white bordered print that began to darken as he shook it gently. Elvis noticed the click, but didn't break the flow. The hallway behind them was filling. Two nurses stood shoulder to shoulder, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the scene. Down the corridor, a patient in a wheelchair craned his neck to see inside. No one spoke. Between verses, Elvis gave Bobby a lopsided grin. "You sound better than me today." Bobby let out a short, surprised laugh. "Don't lie to me, Elvis. I wouldn't dare." Elvis's voice softened again as he turned back to the song. Finally, he reached for the guitar case. The latches snapped open with a metallic click-click. He pulled out a Gibson acoustic plain finish, worn in all the right places. Elvis adjusted the strap over his shoulder and began to strum the gentle, unmistakable intro to Love Me Tender. The first notes hung in the air like a held breath. Bobby closed his eyes. His lips moved with the words even when his voice gave out. The room changed. Outside traffic noises vanished. Even the squeak of the medication cart in the hall seemed to stop. It was just the two of them, patient and performer. Man and man. When Elvis sang the first line, it wasn't for the audience at the door. It was for Bobby. Halfway through the song, something shifted. Elvis stopped playing. The sudden silence was almost jarring. The nurses exchanged puzzled looks. Elvis stepped away from the chair and walked to the foot of Bobby's bed. His guitar hung loose at his side as he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He pulled out something small, folded paper, edges worn. Elvis looked at Bobby for a long second before speaking. "This is for you." The paper was an envelope, cream-colored, with Bobby's name written in blue ink. Bobby reached for it with a trembling hand. "What is it?" he asked quietly. "You'll see," Elvis replied, his voice carrying both warmth and weight. "Not now, later." The nurses in the doorway leaned slightly forward, but Elvis's eyes told them without words this was private. He set the envelope gently on Bobby's lap, right over the hospital blanket. Then, without another word, he stepped back toward the chair, strummed the guitar once, and finished the last verse of "Love Me Tender, Softer Than Before." Bobby didn't sing along this time, he just watched. The final chord rang out, long and low. No one clapped. The quiet felt sacred. Elvis stood, placed the guitar back in its case, and snapped it shut. He glanced once more at the envelope, then at Bobby. "I'll be seeing you," Elvis said, voice low enough that only Bobby could hear. Cliffhanger. Bobby looked down at the envelope, thumb tracing the ink of his name while behind him. The camera caught the moment forever. Elvis's hand lingered on the back of the chair for a moment before he moved. The envelope still rested on Bobby's lap, its edges slightly curled from Elvis's grip. "Don't open it now," Elvis said, his tone gentle but firm. "Later, when you're alone." Bobby's fingers tightened over the paper. "Is it bad news?" A faint smile touched Elvis's face. "No, son. It's just yours." Then he leaned down, one palm braced on the bed rail, the other steadying himself on the mattress. He whispered something too low for anyone else to hear. Bobby's eyes welled instantly. He gave a small nod, like whatever was said had weight. Only they understood. In the doorway, Nurse Lillian glanced at the wall clock 3:15. She noticed Elvis glance too, then toward the hallway where a man in a dark suit stood just far enough back to be inconspicuous. Charlie Hodge reappeared, his expression saying what Elvis didn't. "Time's up." Elvis straightened, reached into his jacket again, and this time pulled out a silk scarfivery with a faint gold trim. It wasn't one of his flashy stage giveaways. It was simple, folded neatly. The kind you could wear on a cool night without drawing attention. He walked round the bed and draped it gently over Bobby's shoulders. "For when you get out of here," he said. Bobby swallowed hard. "I don't think you will," Elvis interrupted softly. The security man in the hallway gave a subtle nod. It was time. Elvis picked up the guitar case, gave Bobby's shoulder one last squeeze, and turned toward the door. The nurses stepped back instinctively, as if parting for a processional. Bobby sat still, the envelope and scarf in his lap. His gaze didn't follow Elvis, he just stared down at the name written in blue ink. Elvis paused at the threshold, adjusting his hat back into place. Without turning, he said, "Take care of my friend." It wasn't clear if he meant the nurses, the hospital, or something more. Then he was gone. The hallway filled again with the muffled sounds of the hospital, the rolling carts, the distant intercom, the squeak of shoes on waxed tile. That night, the East Wing seemed quieter than usual. Bobby kept the envelope on his bedside table, unopened. The next morning, Nurse Lillian's shift began at 7. She went straight to room 214 to find the bed stripped, the mattress bare. The scarf lay folded at the foot. She felt her stomach drop. "Where's Hayes?" she asked the orderly making rounds. The young man shrugged. "Don't know, they just moved him. moved him where? Nobody seemed to have an answer. The nurses traded glances in the break room, each fearing the worst, but saying nothing aloud. By noon, mail was delivered to the nurses' station. A plain white envelope sat on top of the stack. The return address stopped Lillian Cold. Graceland. Cliffhanger. She tore it open, her hands trembling, and began to read. Inside the envelope was thick stationery, the kind that held the faint smell of cologne. Nurse Lillian unfolded it carefully. In Elvis's unmistakable looping script, it read, "You'll always have a seat in the front row." Tucked inside were 2 glossy VIP tickets for his upcoming Memphis show at the Mid-South Coliseum. The date was just weeks away. There was also a personal check, small by celebrity standards, but more than enough for what the memo line said. For a proper guitar, Lillian pressed the note to her chest, already knowing who it was meant for. According to staff who later spoke about it, Bobby had been transferred to a different wing for more intensive care. When they brought him the letter, his hands shook so much they had to hold the ticket steady for him to see. He smiled a full, unguarded smile, something no one on the ward had seen in weeks. "Guess I've got plans," he said quietly. Bobby's health didn't improve much. He never made it to the show, but the letter stayed pinned to the bulletin board by his bed until the day he passed. The scarf lay folded neatly beside it. Weeks later, several of the same nurses who'd witnessed the visit gathered in the break room. Someone had managed to get hold of a bootleg cassette from that Memphis concert. They pushed it into a portable tape deck, the buttons clicking loudly in the small space. The sound was rock-round noise bleeding into every song, the hiss of the recording equipment. But the moment they reached "Love Me Tender," all conversation stopped halfway through. Elvis's voice faltered slightly. He paused, then spoke into the mic. "This one's for my friend, Bobby." You could hear the ripple through the crowd, a murmur, a collective lean-in before Elvis began the final verse. By the last line, the audience wasn't just listening, they were singing. Thousands of voices joined in, carrying the melody beyond. The walls of the Coliseum, in the break room, the nurses sat motionless, listening as the last note faded into applause. Lillian wiped at her eyes. "He kept his promise," she said softly. It's been told that years later, one of Bobby's relatives still had the scarf and the letter framed together, not as memorabilia, but as proof that, once, the biggest name in music took time to make. A promise to a dying man and kept it. Emotional payoff. Elvis didn't just give Bobby a song. He gave him dignity, friendship, and the knowledge that he'd been seen. Kindness doesn't need a spotlight, can live quietly in the memory of those it touches. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes kindness can change a life, and tell me in the comments, what's one moment of compassion you've never forgotten?